Hello, and welcome to Friendship, Wellness, and Wisdom with your hosts, Heather and Rachel.
Together, we're here to talk about all things self-care, from fitness to mindfulness and everything in between.
Whether it's yoga, Tai Chi, Pilates, or practices like tapping and meditation, we're here to help you discover new ways to care for yourself.
We'll also share tips on positive self-talk, finding time for self-care, and creating routines that stick.
We're here to provide you with plenty of tips, tricks, and unsolicited life advice.
Remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. Join our community, and together we can explore the path to wellness.
Alrighty. Today we're going to dive into a subject that kind of might surprise you. We're talking about support and suppression. The surprising part is we're not talking about how support and suppression are different. We're talking about the ways that we can actually kind of blur the lines between support and suppression and kind of take a turn where support turns into suppression. So at first glance, right, they seem like opposites. When you support someone, you support something, you uplift it, you hold it up. And when you suppress something, you're like pushing it down or holding it back. But it's really funny that when you take a closer look at the way that we behave within our relationships, it can be really easy to get the two confused. And a lot of times suppression shows up in the guise of support, right? So, and we don't even realize we're doing it half the time. We're trying to protect someone or help them or have the situation turn out a certain way. And without really knowing it, we're kind of holding ourselves or others back, and we're using suppression instead of support in areas where, again, we don't even realize that we're doing it. Whether it has to do with relationships, cultural norms, or the way that we like approach our own growth, like, where we're putting ourselves out there. Basically, we're going to kind of explore the ways that we blur these lines between these two aspects. And hopefully we'll get like a greater understanding of why we do this and some ways that we can recognize when we're doing it or when it's being done to us, and learn how to make like little changes so that we can learn to be more supportive of ourselves and others. So I wanted to get started and ask Heather, what was it that made you interested in researching this topic? Because honestly, until you sent me this, I never really thought about it that way. But when I read through it, I was like, oh my God, like I never thought of that. And like oddly enough, I'm like, crap, like, you know what? I've kind of like I've done this. I've done it to myself.
We all have.
I've done it to my kids, other people in general. And I'm like, wow, I never realized, how much the line is blurred between being supportive and being suppressive, and how easily it is to confuse that.
The inspiration came from just observing, really, just the observance of both of them. As parents, as our kids get older, we question our parenting skills, right? And things of that nature. And you and I have had discussions about our childhood and certain things that, we either disagreed with or couldn't understand as kids or whatever. And it got me to think like there were so many things that were done for my kids lovingly, but I believe that I was suppressing them, right? Not intentionally. So I wanted to unpack like this dynamic of like relationships and communities and personal growth and things of that nature. And how do we get here? Like, how do we get to the suppression piece from wanting to support? Just as human beings, like we want to do the right thing, but sometimes we kind of cross the line.
Absolutely. And I think really as we get into this and unpack it a bit, I think really what you're going to see is that fear is the thing that drives it all, right? Yeah. You want to be supportive and you want to be there, but that fear gets in there, and all of our own past experiences really kind of color, how we communicate things to other people,
Yeah.
and what we want to encourage and discourage, within all of that. So let's start with like what the key differences are between the two.
So support uplifts, right? It empowers an individual. That's what supporting does, right? It fosters somebody's autonomy, somebody's growth, while suppression is control. It limits your freedom. I look at it as like you're trying to protect somebody. Like it comes into this. I care about you so much. I don't want you to like do this. What is the intention behind your actions, right? And so as we go through this, like it'll be a little bit more clear, but you can have these, like in your mind, these really good intentions, but are they really the intentions for the other person, or are they fostering your fear for the other person?
Right. And yeah, I think that's, like I said, I really kind of feel like that's what is really coming into play when we talk about this. Let's talk about like where it gets confused. Like how can support and suppression
Yeah.
seem similar?
So they can look similar because they both stem from care and concern, right? They both are stemmed from that. But again, what is the true intention, right? For instance, offering advice might be supportive if it's respectful, if it's fostering growth and things like that. When we're looking at support, we want to look at growth. We want to look at empowerment. We
Mm-hmm.
want to look at like inspiring somebody to go to their best path, whatever that looks like. And their best path is not your path. It might be in line with what you're thinking, but it might not be. But you want to foster that support for them to grow and give them all the power to make those decisions.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it. And I try to, although it can be very difficult, if someone does ask me for advice, or you're having those conversations where they're trying to, make a decision or to choose their path, I think too, offering like certain life experiences, like here's what happened to me, like maybe you can, make a decision based on this, or here are some of the ways I feel like this could turn out, like this could happen or that could
Mm-hmm.
happen, or like, without kind of giving like real direction, you're
Mm-hmm.
kind of giving perspective.
Right.
And I think in that way, that's one of the best ways to be a bit more supportive. You're like, okay, here are these ideas, here are the thoughts that I'm having.
Mm-hmm.
Here are some ways, again, of looking at this situation. Here are some places you may run into problems.
Yeah.
Here are some of the ways I found that you might be able to get around this situation. And I feel like these are all very supportive ways and things that you can use to be supportive. And also just, hey, so if you run into trouble, like, okay, these are your choices. Great. You're going to go off and you're going to pick ABC.
Right.
All right, well, if you need anything, then I'm here for you. As
Well,
opposed to, well, I'll help you if.
yeah. I think when you talk to people and like give advice and things like that, it's better to like ask questions. Like, what would be your thought if A, B, and C happened?
Right.
Or what do you think you would do if this happened? Oh, you would find that great? Awesome, Or, ooh, that would be scary for you. What do you think you would do if that situation was scary? How would you navigate that now? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
no, things like that. Or even, what do you think you would need to be able to make this successful?
Right. Yeah. Again, we're all so different and
No, absolutely. Like I totally, so we've talked about this before. So, and she'll hear this and get mad at me, but Maddie's going away for a semester abroad.
mhm,
And she was having a really difficult time kind of navigating all of the things that she had to do. And the staff at the school was just not being helpful. So
mhm.
she was like super stressed, and she was like asking me all these questions and stressing out. And I'm like, you know what? I don't think you should go at all. you know what, just stay home. Like, because I knew like it
Yeah.
would snap
You would
her
be
out of it
you're
and
like,
she'd
Mom,
be
are you
like,
crazy?
wait, what? So it was like, I I flipped the script on her because I needed her to see that,
Mm.
like,
She
wait a
got it.
minute, like, what are you talking about? Of course I want to do this. But I'm like,
Yeah.
right, well, you're struggling through this. You're making it seem like this
Yeah.
horrible experience. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe you shouldn't go. And it was like, wait, what? I was trying to be supportive in a very, a very roundabout way by being like, oh, well, you're going to realize now all the
You
reasons
did
why you
you did
want to
some
go,
child psychology
and
stuff.
right, and why you're going to now take the steps that you have to take
Right.
and deal with all the BS that and the hoops
Well,
that you have to jump through because you want to do.
and sometimes somebody just needs like that, just like wake up, like you can do this. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And that's probably where she was at. She was like,
Well,
oh, wait,
absolutely.
I
But
could do
that's
this.
like when your mom is like, "Oh, you can do this." Like no one
Yeah.
believes that anymore
Yeah.
because
She
like,
wanted
of
to
course
know.
you think I can do this. Like,
Yes.
you're supposed to be supportive.
Right.
So it was like, every once in a while I just got to shake things up and I'm like, "All right, well, so what are some of the ways that we can know like if our actions are being supportive or like or
Yeah.
suppressive, like of what we're doing, like which road are we taking here?"
Plain and simple, ask yourself, whose needs or am I prioritizing? Like, that is like so simple. Like, is it for the person that I'm talking to, or is it for me? Are you free to make your own decisions, even if they lead into failure, even if they lead into growth? Whatever the decision is that you're making, like I just said, we're all so different. So if you could make that decision and know, even if I fail, I can pivot to do this, even if it's wonderful, and I can still grow in these amazing aspects. And so, feeling supported is like, is it lighting up the other person? Like when you're having that conversation, right? And you're talking to somebody and they're lit up, you're supporting them. I'm sure, like, after you had that conversation with her, she was lit up because she was like, I could do this. Like, I'm
Yeah,
going.
it's like it just gets that fire, right?
Yeah. And so she probably was like, just like the fire in the belly at that point. Like, I got this. I'm empowered. We've talked about it in a couple of different, but read the room. And if the person's mannerisms, if the person's demeanor has changed in the conversation, you might not be supporting.
Yeah.
Knowing whose priorities you are really gearing this conversation to is really going to tell you whether you're supporting or suppressing.
I think too, in like a very simple way, if someone's looking to do something and you're giving them all the reasons why they shouldn't, why it's wrong, why it
Mhm.
can't work, like, I mean, those are very like simple indications. And
Right.
again, sometimes we don't realize that because we're trying to protect, or it was just the way someone tried to protect us. So now we think like we're carrying that on.
Hmm.
So just really being mindful of that, noticing what you're saying, and if, listening to yourself and say, are all the things I'm doing, am I pushing them towards something
Hmm.
or am I pulling them back from an experience
Right.
because I'm afraid
Yeah,
and I'm afraid
totally.
for them? But, it's just sometimes it's that simple. Like, am I holding someone back by, what I'm saying here? All right. So we're going to switch over to romantic relationships. And as far as this is concerned, so what are some examples of suppression versus support in terms of romantic relationships?
Yeah. In supportive relationships, a partner encourages you to pursue your passions, even if it's a challenge, and out of their comfort zone, right? For example, celebrating a career change, showing support. On the other hand, suppression might look like you're discouraging them, you're pushing them into doing something they really don't want to do, belittling, you know, making decisions very selfishly, even,
Hmm.
for your partner. And I don't necessarily, I mean, I believe that there are some relationships, not just romantic relationships, but there's a lot of relationships that people are that type of dynamic,
Hmm.
that they are a suppressive person. They try to suppress the people around them. Those relationships that you get in, that you're spouse or boyfriend, girlfriend are, verbally abusive and things like that.
Right.
That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about those things that get said that you don't even realize that you're suppressing your partner. When I talk about like belittling, even if you say to them, I don't really think that's a really good position for you because you don't have any experience in that. You don't really know what you're doing.
Right.
And it's like, wait a second, who am I to tell you, you don't know what you're doing or something like that? It's like, oh, what does that position hold? What is that position? What's the qualifications of that position? What have you done in the past that you know, that you've done that supports that position or whatever, like
Right. But even still, like, even if it's a
digging
new
those
thing,
out.
like with the right qualifications, it's like, what about this excites you? Like, what is it that you're looking forward to doing in this position that maybe
Totally.
you didn't do before, and now, like, it's something that you're excited about?
Yeah.
That's always great to, like, kind of put yourself into like a challenging position, just see all the different ways that you can kind of like shine and take it on and
Yeah.
surprise yourself.
Yes, totally.
Now we're going to talk about like how cultural norms influence, what we tend to
Hmm.
support and one thing and what we tend to suppress.
Yeah. So, supportive cultural celebrations, diversity, evolving traditions, allowing people to refine roles and expectations in cultural norms, right? Suppressive behavior for cultural enforces like rigorous traditions and maybe
Hmm.
not as like flexible because, some traditions are, so many thousands of years old. And so it's supporting the younger generation coming up and for them to create new traditions, but um, pepper in the old traditions and things like that. For example, like the stigma of women leaders and roles in cultural areas, having them step up or step forward in these roles to kind of like create a new environment, a new norm, if you
Hmm.
will, and see how things can be done to support everybody in that environment, whether no matter their gender or their age or anything like that, making sure that everybody has the equality in that cultural role.
Yeah, I think it's very tough. We get very used to
Hmm.
certain things.
Yeah.
And we get very comfortable with even things that we just never really thought about, things that we don't even think to challenge.
Hmm.
They're just kind of that way. And if it doesn't really like go against what we want, sometimes it just goes very unnoticed until someone is like, well, no, this is, I don't want this. I want this.
Right.
And it can be surprising a lot of times, but you're just like, wow, I didn't realize like, someone might actually want to kind of change that
Hmm.
and pivot it. And it's a little bit difficult sometimes when you're that, trailblazer or
Yeah.
to support something that is so kind of far off, what the norm is. And I think the best thing to do is just be like, well, listen, if it's not hurting anybody and it's what someone's got a passion for,
Right.
then you know what? Why not support them?
I can't, I don't know the culture that there's a certain dance, and I want to say it's from Asia, but it was mostly man-led dance, male-led dance. And now this woman who is dynamic, she leads the dance. And it's beautiful the way she does it, but she does it with a masculine flair. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just so great that they allow her to do this. And there has been such controversy over her doing this dance, and it's so amazing that she continues to be a part of um, this tradition. But
Right.
it's, it really is like shaking things up. And I always think of like, what is it, Fiddler on the Roof? It's
Mm-hmm.
tradition. We do it this way
Yeah,
because it's tradition.
we do it this way because we've always done it this way. And it's
Right.
just like, well, maybe there's, maybe we need to just start doing things a different way. Like,
Yeah. And it's okay to put tradition in there, but like allow other people to have the roles and allow other people to have a voice in the tradition. It would be really cool to see if you can bring the old tradition into a new age.
and again, I think too, like you really just have to look at how much is it that like, fear of like,
Yep.
the unknown, it
Yeah.
really plays a part in people not wanting to step away from those very traditional roles, and makes
Right.
it difficult then to support someone who wants to do something different. So that's like I think a really important thing to kind of keep in mind and to kind of key into when you're, maybe trying to stop someone from doing something that's a little less conventional. All right, so the role of communication in all of this, like, so how are we communicating to kind of like open the lines here and really, discuss and know and realize like what we're
Yeah.
supporting, what we're suppressing,
Well,
and how we're showing up for each other.
and I think, I think being transparent with, you know, if you have fears of somebody doing something, being transparent with that, right? And being honest with like if I was going to talk to my son and I didn't like a choice that he was making, and just being transparent with that and being like, I want to support you in this, but I am so fearful and it's my own fear. So how can we have this communication so
Mm-hmm.
I can support you and you can give me a little comfort that this is going to be okay, that you're going to be okay in this transition of whatever this is, right? And so having the transparency in the communication, having open communication, actually asking yourself the question, am I speaking out of fear? Is it my wants and needs that I'm trying to fulfill? Or am I truly supporting that other person for their growth and, empowering them to thrive? And so I think it's really important to be honest
Mm-hmm.
in the communications of this sort, because they are difficult communication. Like communication is difficult, right? It just is. And
Mm-hmm.
so especially when we are bringing our own past whatever into the situation, and like you said, with fear, then it becomes really uncomfortable. And if we can be very transparent that this is an uncomfortable place for me, but I want to be supportive. So, how can we have this conversation? So, I know everything's going to be okay and I can support you moving forward.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And even with ourselves, like a lot of times, like, we'll struggle. We have these inner struggles with the
mhm.
things that we want, and we will suppress ourselves a lot of times from going after the things that we want, exploring like new options, taking like, a non-traditional path because, we were told it wasn't the thing that was supposed to be done. So we will hold ourselves back sometimes from the things that we're really passionate about. And I think in that same way, like with that honesty and that transparency, asking ourselves those very like critical questions and really
Yeah.
finding out what it is that we want and maybe why we're stopping ourselves from
Yeah, while you're
having
stuck.
those things, or maybe even just exploring maybe a different way of approaching it so it fits in a little bit more with what we're comfortable with and used to. And I think like it just opens up a whole new world when, yes, you're really honest with yourself about what it is that you
Mhm.
want, like what your expectations are and what it is that you're afraid of. And then you can kind of come at it in like a different way where you're like, all right, well, this is what I want. This is, what I was told I could have. What way can I come at this where I'm like kind of supporting how I feel and my beliefs at the same time?
And
So,
be open to truly listening to the other person too. Like
mm-hmm.
if you're being transparent and you're giving the honesty of, this, I'm really fearful of this, or I don't believe in this path that you're taking, or whatever, make sure that you're open to listening to the other person and what they have to say too, right? Just like you would listen to yourself. when you're trying to talk yourself through something that's frightening or
Right. But
whatever.
and I think sometimes too, like we kind of assume that people are doing this, but there are so many people who are not asking themselves these questions. And again, like when talking to with someone that you're in a closer, more intimate relationship with, I notice what a lot of people do is like, with their friends or acquaintances, they're more supportive of their ideas because it's not so close to home.
When we look at this, it is not just outside people either. Like we self-sabotage all the time.
Of course.
Instead of supporting ourselves, we suppress ourselves a lot, probably more so than we suppress others.
Definitely. Yeah. When you start asking, why is it that I'm afraid of this? Like, am I really afraid of this? Or did someone tell me to be afraid of this? Is it that I really think that I shouldn't be doing this or can't be doing this? Or is it that someone told me that I can't? Well, why can't I?
Yeah.
And that just like, that's a can of worms that like can
Well, and
really,
even if you just had a bad experience one time and then you just never try it again, you'll
yeah,
never do it
absolutely.
again or whatever. And so
It's like, no, I don't like this. Well, how do you know that? Because, that one time I did it and it was,
25
just
years
awful.
ago.
It's like, all right, it might be, listen, you had one olive. It was bad. Like maybe try a fresh one. You might like them. All right. So what are our key takeaways here?
So always ask yourself, am I encouraging growth or am I shifting it, right? Am I taking things away from that person? This reflection applies both to how you treat others and how you treat yourself, right? It's important to actually analyze you as well. And so when we prioritize empathy, when we prioritize having dialogue and being open and honest, we prioritize thriving. We give people the empowerment to thrive, even ourselves. True support is about trusting others to navigate their path while standing by them through the challenges and triumphs. By fostering this, we create a balance. We can create stronger and more meaningful connections and relationships.
All right.
So
So that is great. And like I said, this was just something that I had never even really thought all that deeply about before. But when it got brought up, it really just kind of triggered like all these thought processes and where are some areas that I might be doing this? Like what can I look into? Like how can I make sure that I'm being as supportive as I possibly can? For myself and for everyone around me.
yeah.
So, I hope this kind of sparks a little bit of conversation, challenges you and like the way that you look at things and how you are allowing yourself to be supported and how you're supporting others. Yeah. And I just, just such a great topic. So thank you for being here with us and discussing this with us. And we hope to see you next time.
Yeah. And we are celebrating a 1-year anniversary.
I can't believe it. Wow.
So that's pretty amazing. So
I'm just flies.
I know. And so hopefully you'll stick with us for our next year.
Yes, come be supportive. We love you. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Friendship, Wellness, and Wisdom. Don't forget to subscribe or follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And follow us on social media for more updates. See you next time.